So those shifts are going to be imperative, because what will happen is, as the market changes with the baby boomers, which presents a massive opportunity. I mean, 30 to 40% of businesses are going to change hands. Exactly. Let's go shopping. Well, hello, Jacob.
Good to see you again. It's wherever we both happen to be in the world while we're jet-setting around, working with everybody that we can help. It's a fun world that we live in, particularly now that it has all reopened and we're booming again.
Absolutely. Last time I spoke to you, we were on opposite sides of the world, and I believe we are again. So coming from Vietnam, the US and Australia, look at us.
Global citizens.
Exactly. Which is really interesting, because when you go from market to market, what I'm finding, as both of us being growth advisors and in the growth space, a lot of the things that we're seeing are very similar.
Absolutely. And a lot of the businesses that I work with are US, UK, EU, and the Australasia region, while also traveling, which is what's got me in Vietnam, is a little more leisure than business. But it's always really fascinating to see how the different size businesses in those different cultures are responding to what's going on. And it is such a globally connected world at the moment. If I think back to the mid-2000s, the boom, and then the global financial crisis, and that felt very localized at the time. You could see how what was happening, even in some states in the US, was different to other states, different to the UK, where I was at the time. Now it really feels like, after what happened in 2020 and what's happening now with supply chains and all of that impact, it just seems to spread across the globe really, really rapidly, if not economically, then at least in terms of fear. And of course, as you know, and I'm sure you're seeing, where there's fear, there's also opportunity, and how different individuals, CEOs are responding to what's happening with all that noise.
Well, yeah, one of the things you talk about often is not to waste a good recession. Elaborate a little bit on that for me.
Well, there's more opportunities are created in a downturn than at any other point in the economic cycle. So when things are going really well, customers, clients, businesses are reluctant to change because things are working, and maybe they're paying a little bit too much, maybe margins to their suppliers are getting a little bit fatter, but everyone's going okay and it's working. I know when I started growth advising in 2006, 2007, it was such an easy job to do, because you'd just go into companies and say, put your prices up by 10%, 20%, and they would, and everyone would accept it. It's only when the tide goes out that we start to change those behaviors, and the businesses that respond too late miss out on the opportunities. Customers change, suppliers change, buying patterns change, and that then creates the opportunity. It's the opportunity for you as a business to respond, to grab that market share, grab that opportunity, be ahead of the curve, and to be working as a leader on how you recruit the best people, get ahead of what's happening in the future, to grab all of that opportunity. The people who just wait for good times to return miss out on all of that opportunity, which is why I say, and the podcast that I talk on is, don't waste a good recession. It's such an opportunity. Don't just bury your head in the sand from fear and wait till it goes away, because then you'll miss out on everything you could be doing.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I call it fat and lazy businesses. And when we look
I feel seen.
Yeah. Hardly. But what's interesting is, we both have probably read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And what was interesting was we always had these longer cycles. You would ride out the bad ones and then boom in the good times. But I don't feel we have that luxury anymore. In fact, I don't think it's 7-year cycles at all with AI and everything that we've got coming. So it's very important that CEOs and founders, I'm stressing to them that they have to make sure they're agile, and that's not just for now, but ongoing, regardless of the timing. But we need to own our growth, and blaming it on third-party external things is not okay. Oh, the market's down, the tariffs, the this, the that. There's plenty of things we can blame it on, but really the focus of a CEO needs to be on growth, because if you're not growing, you're dying. So when I'm speaking to people and they're waiting for the market to come back, I find that a very dangerous strategy. And like you said, there are massive massive opportunities when there's any sort of crisis. When everyone zigs, you need to zag, but you have to be in a position to be able to step up to that opportunity. And one thing that a lot of economists are talking about at the moment, especially in SMEs, is the fact that they will have increased pressures on their margins and declining profits. Now, you and I go in and see hundreds of businesses a year, and collectively, what we both have discovered is that they're all experiencing it now, that margin creep and that decline in profits. But we've got wages that are going to continue to rise. We've got obviously the baby boomers, leaving and the workforce, and you've got that birth rate going down. So there's going to be a lack of talent to tap into. And then, of course, this mix of the businesses that we work with that are sort of over the 400 mil mark are aggressively using AI with agentics versus the small businesses who are starting to just adopt it and have conversations and maybe get a group ChatGPT subscription. So this all concerns me because small business is the backbone of our economy, and we really need to make sure that we're focusing on our margins, increasing our profits, and owning our growth.
It's something you speak about so well when you talk about agile, not fragile. And really the opportunity ought to be there for those SMEs to embrace that. They're smaller businesses, they can be more nimble, they don't have big decisions that have to go up through 4 or 5 layers of management and sit at a board or a C-suite meeting or those kind of committee decision making. And yet I'm seeing, particularly with AI, exactly what you're describing. There's so much uncertainty amongst those small business owners that they're being very reluctant to experiment. And I understand it. It's new. Any investment in AI technology is a risk at the moment in the sense that it may not work. The specific tool you might find might be brilliant for your business, but in 6 months, that company's actually gone broke or it's been superseded. It turned into a feature at Claude. And so now you've got to change your whole workflow to go over there. Like, those are real risks for SMEs that larger businesses can somewhat absorb. But the challenge is the more that large corporations are getting that advantage with using AI, the harder it's going to be for SMEs to catch up. And that is, as a technology, something that I think is maybe not the first time, but it's certainly rare. We haven't seen something quite so game-changing for small business, where small businesses are not at the cutting edge of being able to respond to that, of having that agility. What do you see as being the key things for those businesses? Agility versus fragility. And as you know, I talk sometimes on the anti-fragile kind of approach, how you are resilient to change and even grow from that. Are there some key changes that you're talking to business owners about right now that you're seeing help them to overcome that obstacle?
Well, it's very interesting because it's more a conversation around adoption. So, for example, the larger companies have been utilizing offshoring and global talent for a long time. And I find that in my YPO circles, 13 out of 14 of peers in a peer network or a forum have already been leveraging offshoring for over 20 years. Whereas when I go into smaller peer groups, what I'm finding is that 1 in 14 have leveraged offshoring. And I'm really hoping that it doesn't mean that this second advantage, all these levers that the big guys are pulling in order to make sure that they're profitable and, more importantly, have cash to meet opportunities in hard times. I'm really hoping that this second wave, which is AI, which is the much bigger wave, I'm really hoping they use this as an opportunity to look at how they do things differently, from how their org charts are structured. They need to be agile, flexible, affordable workforces, which means switching conversations from territory to talent. I don't care if they're in Philadelphia or the Philippines, as long as I'm accessing the top talent. So it's a real mindset shift around how do we shift our thinking around our org charts, how they function, tapping into that global workforce. How do we put AI into every single department? This isn't just driven by a few people. It has to be driven by everybody. So those shifts are going to be imperative, because what will happen is, as the market changes with the baby boomers, which presents a massive opportunity. I mean, 30 to 40% of businesses are going to change hands. Exactly. Let's go shopping. My business partner says to me all the time, you won't catch her in a shoe store, but you will catch her out shopping for business bargains every day of the week. So, she calls it my shoe collection. But For me, I have cash. So I have businesses that are profitable, that are growing, that are spinning off cash so that when an opportunity arises, we could pick up one of those businesses you can read the book, Zero Down, or there's ways to structure it. And when we look at different segments, sure, 30 to 50 mil plus businesses get the interest of private equity. You've got venture capital, but a lot of people don't want VC money. A lot of these baby boomers don't want to be stuck in an earnout and pressure cooking their businesses, and they don't have succession plans. So if you have the discipline to do these things in order to spin off cash and create predictable revenue models and growing businesses that are profitable, what will be great is these $5 to $15 million competitors we can pick up with cash. So we really should be focusing on those things. That's the key focus for all my CEOs. I'm like, revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king, which means shopping.
And it was how I reinvigorated, refocused my advisory business 5 or 6 years ago, and am now doubling down on exclusively working with those portfolio entrepreneurs, those individuals or the collectives that own multiple businesses and see that opportunity. You won't get a return on investment anywhere that's better and more reliable than small, medium-sized businesses. I mean, yes, you can roll the dice on the next crypto fart coin and maybe get lucky, or you can go down that stability, the lazy fat, low risk approach to buying shares on the stock market that are already at 18, 20, 30 times profit. You can buy a small, medium-sized business, and some of these, the baby boomers that are retiring, there's no succession plan. The actual value that they have, the competition you have as a buyer is negligible. You can be buying these sometimes for less than 1 times annual profit. You get your money back immediately. They spit out cash when you can bring some of the systems that we know work in business and just leverage them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's amazing to see in the companies that I'm working with, how people are doing that, learning how to do that, and then in our own portfolio, how we're slowly, despite our kind of crazy, unusual life, traveling around and homeschooling family and those kind of things, how we're being able to scoop those up. And if you are privileged enough to be leading one of those mid-sized businesses that has that cash, then the size of the opportunities you can grab is huge. And something like AI is just fantastic leverage for what you're going to be able to do in those businesses. You can walk in and see how to utilize that to accelerate, to grow margin, all of those benefits, then the cumulative effect is going to be enormous. It's such a perfect storm of opportunity, and kind of sad that so much of the media, at least, seems to want to talk doom and gloom at every opportunity.
Well, I deliberately don't watch media for that very reason. I keep
Yes,
up with
circle of
the top
concern. It's out
headlines.
there.
Not good for the mental health, that's for sure. But that's what I love about doing business in the States is business as usual, right? And, when we look at businesses, at that sort of 20 mil plus, we can find easy $1 million worth of savings through AI automation and offshoring. So imagine what that would mean, even if it's a business that's only at 5 or 10 million, it still untaps a great amount of capital. So inside your red is obviously one thing. We call that all the areas that we need to run the business but don't drive revenue. That's really where we need to start focusing. So when we go in, that's what we look at. We look at the red and we do an assessment on how we can apply efficiencies inside the red. And then we look at how do we build in-house marketing and lead generation, because we need to own our growth. For the same cost as what you pay for 2 or 3 retainers with agencies, you can literally build an in-house engine room of 4 people full-time who have 10, 15 years experience in your industry from the Philippines that are doing 40 hours each a week on a strategy that's set based on predictable revenue models. So when we look at that, activity equals outcomes. But they keep saying to you and I don't have the money for growth. And I say, actually, you do. You're sitting on it in your red.
It's in the red. Yeah, red, blue, black is just such a perfect way of analysing any business, because those leaders ought to be spending a lot more time in the black, and yet they get pulled into the red because they see cost savings. If I do it myself, then I can save the business money. Business doesn't need you saving money. They need you doing the high value tasks, and that's going to be finding the automation, the AI, the offshoring. I love that as a triumvirate approach. Spend some time in the black finding those solutions. You're going to save 10, 50, 100 times as much money as you can by being the person that goes in and knows how to fix the office furniture yourself. And it's a trap that is very easy with a lot of short-term thinking, I think, to fall into, even at the size businesses we're talking about. And then that opportunity, and it's one of the fabulous things, I think, around AI and how it really has developed this year, is just how much it is now being able to bring value into the blue and the black as well. It's not just the red where you can automate a few little systems and save a little bit of money. It can really accelerate marketing, customer service, delivery of your work, and the development of strategy and culture, which is probably scary for people who are hoping that it will be nothing more than the LLMs. AI's already gone long, long past that.
Oh, it is not the dot-com era. This is not equivalent or equal to that. This is the Industrial Revolution 2.0 as far as I'm concerned. And you will have people, we have this saying, when people aren't willing, or team members aren't willing to adapt to AI, when I state that AI is everyone's responsibility, and they say, well, we have members of our team who are pushing back on AI, and I say, well, you know what, they can keep their horse. And you pretty much know what I'm saying there. It's coming to that point. So being able to be a strong leader is very important. So the fish rots from the head. So we really need to make sure that we have the courage to do this with grace and ease, but courage in order to guide our people through this and shift from this scarcity mentality to abundance. And there is so much opportunity out there if we look at doing things differently, slightly different, and looking at other frameworks that are working for other people, processes. EOS has been around for a long time, EGS. All these things have been proven to be able to improve efficiencies, operations, put in infrastructure for growth. Those are the things that we should be focusing on in the black, and the leader should be, the CEO should be leading those initiatives and making sure that we're ready. We're not only remaining relevant, but I want businesses to thrive. They're the backbone of our economy, small business, and the bigger guys are getting bigger and the gap's getting wider, and we just cannot afford for that to happen because they employ so many people. They're the ones writing the checks in the local communities. So, we have to make sure that we are surviving through this next transition. I don't want people to keep their horse.
Yeah. And we joke lightly about the baby boomer and let's go shopping. But I think you're touching on a really good point there, where so many of those businesses have been built over decades as part of a community of customers, a community of suppliers, just contributing back to the community. They're the businesses and the business owners who didn't think anything of sponsoring a local sports team or the local school, or supporting other local businesses, even if maybe that was slightly more expensive than ordering something now online. Losing those businesses because there's nobody there to buy them, even at a low price, is really going to be pulling the heart out of a lot of communities. And we have already seen that a lot with a lot of high streets in the UK, where I spend a lot of my time each year. Those local businesses have gone away because they just can't compete. So many of these boomer-owned businesses, as a generalization, are still hugely competitive, hugely important, valuable enterprises. And if they just shut the door and walk away, their customers are not going to have much choice but to go to the much bigger companies, the nationals, the multinationals, which just takes all of that money out of the economy. When we, as entrepreneurs, as portfolio entrepreneurs, or businesses that are looking to own that SME space, when we can rescue those sellers, those baby boomers who want to retire, we can give them the retirement that they've earned without having to lose the business, the staff, the community aspect. That's going to, I think, be a huge social development over the next 10 years. We've been talking about it for 10 years. It's really happening. I think the next 10 years we're going to see where are those towns and communities where those businesses have been saved and continue to thrive, supported by the community, versus the ones that have been gutted, and the flow-on effects into those communities, which is, it's going to be sad. It's going to happen in a lot of places. We have the opportunity, you and I and our teams, to make it happen less and less, as less as possible.
Yeah, and look, businesses have to put their mask on first before you can help others. So it's getting
Absolutely.
your business in the right shape and making sure that the margins are good, the profit is there, the cash flow is there. Really doing that first, and then looking at acquisition opportunities is a great opportunity. Because for me, I come from venture capital, right? You build and you exit businesses, and I've really shifted now to a build and hold model. And you know me, I speak all over the place because I want to make sure that these businesses understand what they need to do to thrive into the future, and B, if they do need an option to sell because they are a baby boomer, making sure they don't close their doors, but instead find an allied business that can look after them and take them through to the next layer of growth. Or, you know, those are the ones that I'm buying, right? I am buying a lot of businesses between that 5 and 15 mil mark. Yes, they're harder work, but it's really important that they survive for everyone's sake, including communities and the many families. And we're not talking about we're not talking about cost cutting like VCs or PEs can come in and they'll wipe out whole departments. This is really an intentional transition and making sure that everybody's on the bus and everybody knows where we're going, and really teaching them the steps and giving them the tools to be able to, whether it's AI or anything else, global teams, being able to adopt these principles that bigger companies have been using for decades to make sure that they too get to evolve in their careers as well. So I'm very excited to speak on that topic. I speak a lot inside Vistage and YPO because it's so important that people know that there's a third option. It's not VC, PE, or close my door.
And those are such, you know, the perfect groups of people, you know, the individuals. And I know myself when I go into the Vistage groups and EO and some of those organizations, you have the individuals, the leaders who are looking for that opportunity. They really want to not only implement some of the better practices within their business, but look for where that real growth opportunity is. And here is where it is. I joke about serial entrepreneurs and serial killers. That is so often what I hear when people talk about I buy and sell businesses. And I've helped a lot of businesses to sell and you know, some to do the acquisitions. You know, certainly when it goes to sell a business, if it is the highest bidder that you're looking for, then there's a lot of things that can be done on the seller side to pull out costs and to think very short term about the business. When you really are coming to buy that with a view towards the future, then that creates a lot more opportunities to not have that business have to strip itself out, to be able to see where the value really is and where those opportunities lie. And I think being able to have those conversations earlier as well, to be talking to the target businesses that you want to, is a really great way to where everybody wins. It's a win-win-win for everybody involved, instead of going down a private equity route where they've got a 10-year time frame and their goal is to pump and dump just by the nature of how that fund happens to be established.
Yeah, the vulture capital tag certainly, you know, got its name for a reason, right? And the most devastating thing I see is that entrepreneurs who've spent decades building these businesses, they leave so much money on the table because they're focusing on EBITDA and profit, or band-aids, like you said, where they might strip out some expenses, but it's not long-term sustainable. But the second one is they really don't have predictable revenue models. They don't have scalable, repeatable sales models. They often don't even own their customers. They certainly don't own their growth. And thirdly, they're not looking at their rate of growth. They're not being strategic around potential acquisitions before an exit. So those three things, they might get 1 out of 3, but they're leaving so much money on the table with the other 2. So this is usually a once in a lifetime event. Not other people aren't crazy like you and I who buy businesses all the time and love it. The more the merrier, right? A lot of CEOs, it's a once in a lifetime. So I want to make sure that they are really setting themselves up to get the maximum value, so then they can go on to do more philanthropic things in their community and with their families. You know, it's huge opportunity that often ends in tears.
From that seller side, are you seeing it improving or is it getting worse? Business owners who are looking to retire or looking to exit, more aware of that now compared to 5 or 10 years ago, or is it still very much the people, as you say, who just haven't really thought about what they could do to get a better outcome, get a better multiple?
You know what? To be honest, I think there's two things. A lot of these businesses are going to go to market at the same time, and as you know, supply and demand. So, if we have a flood of businesses, that will only decrease the value of those if there's plenty of options. That's the first thing. The second thing that I'm finding is that I think they've left it too late, some of these baby boomer businesses. They've done a wonderful job of building a business over time, and due to their reputation, repeat business, referrals, those sorts of things. But they haven't put those growth mechanisms in place or looked at acquisitions and those sorts of levers that you and I often put into businesses. So they've come out of COVID and now they're faced with AI, and a lot of them just don't want to do it.
They're tired, they throw up their hands,
I don't blame
get
them.
out for whatever they can.
But then you and I have also seen that quick sale to the vulture capitalists, as they call it, or where they roll them up, they bolt them together, and they really do strip out the culture of the company in doing that. So for me, I've sold a business to the highest bidder and it didn't end well, right? Because I chose money over values alignment. So if a baby boomer is at that point where they feel like they don't have the energy to stay in there and do what's needed to evolve, to be more agile and address future opportunities and challenges, then the second thing is to look at, well, what are your values and who are you going to sell to that aligns to that will make sure that they not only transform the business and do the things that are needed to ensure it remains relevant and continues to thrive, but it also aligns with their values. So I spend a lot of time with baby boomers when I'm buying their businesses saying, don't just give me the SOPs or the operations and the how-to of and the handover of how you run this business. Give me the heart as well. What values are important to you? What have you instilled in this that has meant that you've attracted great local talent, that you've retained your staff, that you've retained your customers? I think that's really important, and their vision for what they want in the future, because I got plenty of energy in the tank. So if you give me the brief, I can take it on to the next step. And I often talk about bus stops, both with your teammates and also with businesses. Sometimes you get them to a certain point, and then after that, someone else needs to step in and get it to the next point. And for me, I love building businesses and getting it to larger, over the 50 mil mark. But then once you get to that size, we have boards, we have all sorts of things going on. And quite frankly, that's not my happy place. I love to build and grow. So I know where my bus stop is, so it's really important that they also think about, look, let's be honest, where's your bus stop? What are the values? What do you want to see for the business? But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to drive it there.
And it's such a great analogy for the team, describing those bus stops. And I think about one of the big fears when my clients have sold to whomever they've sold to, because that's their time and it's time for them to hop off the bus. They often have a genuine fear about how the team will respond. And I think that's a genuine concern. My experience, and maybe yours is similar or different, is most of the team are quite happy to stay on the bus. That's the way to describe it, is we have reached the end of our journey. Maybe we've run out of energy. The business needs something different. And I'm the same as you. Once you start talking about boards and management committees and that kind of thing, I get bored, want to go to the pub. So that's the Englishman in me.
I'll be there with you.
So yeah, that's my bus stop as well. Having the team understand that that's the opportunity of being acquired as a business, is the extra expertise that's going to bring in and the benefits that can have for their career, culture, opportunities, clients, processes, systems, support, all of those things. And I find that keeps the team very loyal, where maybe some of those retiring business owners felt that the team were all going to walk or had other fears.
Absolutely. We don't want it to turn into an episode of the movie Speed.
We can't even slow down the bus, let alone have an opportunity to get people off.
And there's no one on the bus, right? It's just derail. It's going off course completely. So I think that's really important as well. Well, thank you for all that you do to help businesses grow. And it's not a crystal ball growth. A lot of people like to think it is. Certainly your marketing agencies and your salespeople, they all think there's a particular art to it that they can't put it down to an SOP, but really it is something you can systematize. It is something that you can put into frameworks without losing the heart. But that's fundamentally important if you want to grow. We need to have these systems and processes for growth so that we can turn those levers up when we need to spin off cash and meet opportunities. So thank you for all you do, and thanks for the conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Every time. It's always great to hear what you're seeing out in the world as well, where that reinforces and challenges all of us to keep growing and improving in our business and advisory work. No, always a joy. I'm glad we were able to find the time.
Great. Well, keeping with the bus analogy, I have looked under a lot of hoods in the last 25 years. So it's surprising how many repeat things there are. So as I say, if something works, R&D, rip off and duplicate.